Okay, my name is Catherine Miller and with Team 4, and we're going to be discussing Chapter 6, 7, 8, and 9, starting with Chapter 6 about communication and collective intelligence. And the chapter starts out with team communication. Does anybody have anything particular that they want to bring up about Chapter 6? I think it was a little, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You're good.
No, I was just going to say, my name is Terry. I go by Terry. The team communication wasn't what I thought it was going to be, as far as how it was addressing communication. It was a little confusing for me. I didn't know if anyone else kind of had a better understanding of what they were referring to as far as team communication.
This is Doug, and I was just looking through the text, and I feel like to some degree it's probably an uneven communication problem. So in the chapter it just defines it as virtually in any group, handful of people do the majority of talking, and I think we're all kind of like the type, A personality, which is, nothing's ever wrong with that. I think that's always a good, you always want to have those kind of people on there, but I think it's always kind of figuring out, making sure that we're trying to give people room to speak what's on their mind and kind of create that good, respectful thing. So I think it's more like along those lines that was probably kind of contributing to some aspect of the miscommunication.
Okay. Aaron, you were going to say something?
Were we talking specifically about Chapter 6?
Yeah, we're still in Chapter 6.
Okay, yeah. So, I don't know. I kind of found it interesting. They had a little section here about absorptive capacity, which is, they said here defined as transforming new knowledge into usable knowledge. And what I found interesting is they had using that knowledge in a group setting, which I think that's given that this class is a group setting, it says like in a typical 4-person group, 2 people do over 62% of the talking.
Right.
In a 6-person group, 3 people do over 70% of the talking. In an 8-person group, 3 people do over 70% of the talking. So I found it funny how people who are more comfortable taking knowledge and turning it into usable knowledge, talking to the people about it. That's interesting because working in a group dynamic, we kind of get to see it at work.
Right.
When we're meeting all the time.
I also did like, Doug again, on page 142 of Chapter 6, there's some best practices for information sharing. And the one part about separate review and discussions. Another part I really liked was the pre-discussion polling, which I think we started to do some aspects in our chat communications. Kind of get a feel of the conversation before we bring it to this forum.
Right.
So I think we were already kind of naturally, I think it's, looking through the chapter here that some of the miscommunication issues are starting to naturally work itself out.
Right.
Anyone else on Chapter 6 before we move to Chapter 7? Anything stood out?
No, not so much.
Okay. All right, so chapter 7, anything from that section that was stood out for you guys?
This is Aaron here. I think, to me, overall in the chapter, what stood out to me was basically the emphasis. It had two different emphases. The mistakes that are made within groups as far as decision making goes. What stood out to me is mistakes made when too much is dependent on an individual decisions, and then also the mistakes that are made when like groupthink takes place, and the group has too much influence over each individual. So each individual's idea. I thought that was probably the most interesting part of the chapter to me. Is they had several really good examples, like the Kennedy administration and in the early '60s and stuff, and other examples like that.
Yeah, they did have good examples in this chapter. I remember that. But is groupthink? See, I'm still vague on groupthink. Is groupthink like peer pressure, or is it different?
Go ahead.
Groupthink is like.
I would think, groupthink to me is like stuff that happens. Groupthink is what happens when you get mob mentality and things like that. So it's when people are not really giving individuals an opportunity to express themselves within the group. It's sort of like you're with us or against us. That sort of idea.
Well, I think it's like, I think to me it's, I think my definition is a little close to Aaron's. It's just mine's a little bit different. It's kind of more like just more it's just placing more importance about consensus than about priorities. It's almost like it's more important that we just make sure we all agree, and it doesn't leave room for disagreement, or it doesn't leave room for any kind of conflict, because I think our natural tendency is when there's conflict, most people always view that as a negative, and conflict could be really, if it's done in that right way, just like we talked about in the progress video, it could be something that can move the conversation or move the project, or it doesn't matter what it is, it just moves it in a continuing direction.
Right, and I totally agree with you, Doug. I mean, I guess mob mentality is what I think of as one version of groupthink. Mobs, most of the time it's not like that. But I would agree. At the end, what it is it's about conflict and not really wanting to deal with individuals expressing themselves. Basically, unless you're, like you said, consensus, unless you're agreeing with the group, you're pretty much not welcome within the group.
Okay, so sort of like when you're new to a team, or a team is new. I guess I should say it that way. And when a team is new and nobody really knows each other, so everybody's just going along with each other because we don't want to offend anybody. Is it like that?
Yeah, because
that's kind of the.
Go ahead.
I'm kind of interpreting it as you're kind of going along with something even though it doesn't really necessarily make sense to you.
Okay.
That's kind of the way that I'm taking the group thing. I could be wrong, but that's the way it sounds like.
like I'll give you an example. Like I just came from a meeting today, and I met with a group of like a marketing team, and the marketing team came off a 4-hour meeting, and then they entered into another 2-hour meeting, and they wanted the meeting to be done in like half the time, but we couldn't get it done in half the time, and so groupthink was creeping in because it was kind of almost like the first idea that someone would say, everyone would jump on, not because this was necessarily the best idea, but because it was the quickest idea that would get them out of the meeting faster.
Faster. Okay, gotcha. Okay. All right. I'm good now.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, because I was having trouble with, there's groupthink, and then there's the Abilene paradox, which I really like the example. I understood that because it was like, Dad brings up the suggestion, let's go to Abilene and, get something to eat, and everybody chimes in, yeah, let's go, let's do that, and it's like over 100 degrees, and they're driving in a car with no air conditioning. Then they get back and they're like, none of us wanted to do that. We just, went along because I thought you wanted to do that. So,
right.
And I didn't understand the difference between that and the group thing. So thank you for explaining it.
Yeah, of course. And I didn't blame them either. I mean, 6-hour meeting it's just.
Wow, that's a whole work day right there, basically.
No, I mean they were getting ready. I felt bad for them. They're getting ready to pull their hair out. So that was to me. I was like, I can see why you want to get done with this meeting soon. Anyone else from the chapter? Yesenia, anything from you? Any other feedback on 7?
No.
Okay. All right, we'll move to chapter 8.
Okay, I'm looking at there's a table on chapter 8 on page 197. It has the 3 different types of conflict.
Okay.
And I totally understand relationship conflict. That's pretty easy. But the difference, what's the difference between the process conflict and the task conflict?
I gotta look at that. Hang on, I gotta flip to that page.
I'm sort of thinking that the process conflict has to do with the process of getting the task done, and the task conflict just strictly has to do with the task. Does that sound like I'm understanding it correctly?
Yeah, I think basically the task conflict is who does what. I mean that to me that's the way I read it.
Okay.
And then for me the process conflict is sort of that's more planning. Like it says here, how often do you disagree about who should do what? That's more of a planning sort of issue. Who does the planning?
Okay.
Who decides what the plan is? Task conflict is more like who does what work.
Okay.
Not necessarily who does the planning. I don't know. That's the way I read it, personally. I don't know if anybody agrees.
I think it's. Let's see.
I don't know so much if it's planning as much as delegating.
Oh, it does say that delegation of duties and resources.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. I think the approach versus the merits of the ideas or plans or projects.
So, okay, and forgive me, I like simple examples, but process conflict would be about, like, say, Doug, you gave Aaron a glue stick, and I got the old Elmer's in a jar with the little stick kind of thing, and we got into it about the stupid glue.
Yeah, right. Or specifically in our project, an example would be is that, the process conflict would be is, okay, maybe we have a different approach of when in the process should we submit our edits by what day so we can submit our final draft, versus maybe the task conflict is the idea of I will handle the itinerary, and you handle the communication plan.
Okay. So task is the individual pieces, and the process is how we're getting from point A to point B.
That's how I always interpret that. Right.
Okay.
Right.
What else did we find in here that was bizarre?
So then we would consider us like a process conflict, since we pick what we do, or would it be like task conflict?
Well, I think we're both. I think we're using both consistently. Yeah. Because I think in a project or team setting, you can't have just one or the other. I mean, I think both naturally occur.
Right. Because, there are always going to be tasks, and then there's always, the processes that you go through to, delegate those tasks and, discuss who's doing what. That's where I come up with the planning part. To me is, I guess I always plan, delegation is a part of planning to me.
Yeah.
Personally.
Yeah.
Okay, makes sense.
One thing I did notice in Chapter 8 that I thought was just, I think it was relevant to our team to some degree, and it's always relevant for us anyway, but the managerial grid on page 207.
Oh, yeah.
And it's actually just a really good tool. I actually teach that to my guys on my team, because it's kind of amazing how some people are just still lacking like the management skill, or dealing with different personalities or ideas or disagreements.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's always good to think about simple tools like that kind of thinks about where am I falling at right now in this situation or circumstance, and is that the one I need to be under.
Yeah, when I looked at and maybe I'm looking at this wrong, but under the managerial grid, am I understanding, or maybe I'm misunderstanding, that the ideal would be the collaboration?
Yes.
That's where you want your teams to be, in the collaboration corner. Avoidance, obviously, we don't want to be there, because then we're not communicating and we're not doing what we need to do. And compromise isn't necessarily good either, because that's kind of like, I'm just going to give in because I'm tired of being in this 4-hour meeting.
Right.
Kind of thing.
Well, yeah, I would agree. So I would say that collaboration being in the top, going at the arrows going in both directions, it being farthest from avoidance.
Well, I don't know. I always kind of look at this as I don't know if saying that one extreme is. I think it's all circumstantial. So for example, I would think about collaboration as, if I can get a good win-win, right, that's great, because that's a team environment and we're all focused on achieving the same goal. But I'm trying to think of a good example about an avoidance. That's not saying that that's the right approach, but it's not necessarily saying it's a bad approach. I think there was an example. I gotta look through. There was an example on here that caught my attention, and maybe I always just misinterpret this chart. But go ahead.
I apologize for interrupting, but I didn't see, unless I'm missing it, unless it was further back and I didn't connect the two. But I didn't see a great deal of connection or explanation, I guess is what I wanted to say. Explanation of how this grid works.
Well, so what the grid's saying is that, so on the one that's going up and down, right, concern for oneself.
And self-preservation.
Right.
Okay.
The more that your self-preservation, you're tending to fall into like the competition.
Okay.
But the other side, right, as you get more concerned about for others, then that's when you fall into accommodation, and then the collaboration.
Right. Okay. Okay. So better to be because.
Well, and I say, yeah. I mean, I guess for me, what it would say is that collaboration is sort of the meeting point of concern for oneself and concern for the other person. It's a win-win.
Right.
Obviously.
So competition, for example, right? If you're in an environment where you are competing with one another and it's a clearly defined, that's what you're getting. Then compromising or accommodation wouldn't necessarily be a fit in that circumstance,
right?
Because it's a clear cut. It's a clear cut. The purpose is I'm in it for myself. Like a sporting event, for example, avoidance, like for example, if you're on a team and someone does something, or let's just say it's just some odd behavior, right? It's not killing the team. If you try to confront it, it may not be the best timing of it, but if you avoid it, it's not hurting anyone.
Okay. So the right strategy at the right time, in other words.
Right, because then, if you think about compromise, right, compromise on the scale is a balance of both. It's right in the middle, right? You're concerned for yourself. You're also concerned for others, but compromise isn't necessarily going to be the best situation in certain circumstances, right? I mean, if you're a manager talking to your employee and if let's say there's a disagreement, the manager knows the right thing they need to do, you're not really compromising at that point. You really are just telling them this is how it is.
Right. Yeah. Okay. And I think that's what the text was trying to explain there on the next page, where it talked about Neil passed away, Tim and his mother, Gert, competed, each intimidating the other. When they focused on a higher order goal and cut their salaries and built the company up again, they were engaged in collaboration. When the question of offshoring came up, Gert capitulated to Tim and accommodated his desires. So that's okay. Now I'm seeing how that works. Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else on chapter 8?
No.
Okay. And then chapter 9.
Chapter 9 is creativity.
I think for me in this chapter, I think it's just the main point is this. If you're leading a team or you're on a team, you want to allow room for others to either present their ideas or to do something that will accomplish something. Give full control and creativity to your team versus a rigid, this is how we're going to do things. Because then I think when you go at that approach and you don't allow that kind of culture where others can feel like they're contributing and bringing good value to the table, then you've lost people already halfway through. Because they feel like, well, we're already doing it a certain way, so I really don't, my opinion is not valid, or you really don't need me on the team, and it's just a low morale and productivity point.
Right. And you don't want to come across as looking stupid, so you might have an idea, but you don't want to bring it up. I remember a brainstorming session a long time ago, but I remember whoever was leading that brainstorming session, I remember him saying, there's no such thing as a bad idea. Just throw any idea, good, bad, and then we'll sort through them later and pick out, the ones that just aren't going to work, and then we'll go from there. So nobody felt intimidated or felt like, well, my idea is stupid, I shouldn't say anything. Everybody was just blurting things out, and he was writing them on the board, and it was actually pretty fun.
Exactly. Because I've been in plenty of brainstorming sessions where it starts the same way. You're like, hey, no, there's no dumb idea. Let's just jot it down. And not even 2 minutes into it, someone's like, that's a dumb idea.
I think another great thing about this chapter, just to me, are all the practical applications, because I agree with you guys in the sense that I think the most important thing, the main point of this chapter is to have a forum for fresh ideas. It's a place where people can express different ideas, and that just makes your team better overall. But what I thought was great was that just, talking about brainstorming and all these different actual practical methods that you can use to have these forums and express it within the group. So I thought that was really cool that they had, because I wasn't expecting that.
Right.
Yeah, there was a lot more in here than what I was expecting, that's for sure.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting, too, is when it talks about enhancing team creativity, there's still a strong structure that you put in place, talking about competition, setting high goals, explicit set of rules. There's still a defined, boundaries, but those are the only boundaries, right? And then everyone else is understanding of that, but now their ideas can just flow, or the direction or task can flow, because they know what they need to follow through by, and everything else is, if it's good for the team, let's do it kind of mentality.
Well, and I have a graphic design degree, and I think often a misconception of graphic design is we get to do what we want in a project. And what I always tell people is, hey, we have, just like everybody else, we have we have boundaries. We have a set of rules, and within those rules, you can be as creative as you can possibly be. But
right.
You still have a set, if you're doing printing or something, this piece of paper is only so big, and it has to say a certain thing. And so, those might be the boundaries there, is, hey, it has to have this copy on it, it has to be this big. But you have to add those elements to it other than that, you can be as creative as you want to. So I think understanding, yes, that there are boundaries within a team.
Are you guys on chapter 9?
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
still on chapter 9.
Okay, I'm sorry, my phone died.
Oh, okay. I was wondering why you were so quiet.
Anything else on that chapter?
No.
I can't think of anything. The only thing that and I'm not sure if I remember this from this chapter or from another class, but creativity sort of inspires creativity. For instance, I'm really not a creative person. I don't decorate for Christmas or Halloween or none of that. I just don't. It's not in me. But when I'm sitting with a group of people and they're starting to throw out ideas, we can do this, we can do this, and then all of a sudden the wheels in my head start turning, and suddenly I'm creative. And so.
No, I would have to agree with you. I'm a blank canvas. Seeing something, oh, that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's all about the setting. I would definitely not consider myself a naturally creative person either, but I do feel like when I am in a room with more creative people, my creative juices tend to flow out because I don't want to be the least creative person in that room. That's a terrible title to have.
Well, and I think that's the most important thing is, nobody's in a vacuum when it comes to creativity.
Right.
Meaning things just don't fall out of the sky to you. Creative people are influenced by other creative people, just like anybody else. Just like people who are maybe a little more conservative, not as creative. They're influenced by other people too. So I think that is something really important to remember is that we don't all just think of it on our own.
Yeah,
Right.
that's a good point.
All right. Anything else?
That's it.
All right. Well, that covers our chapter review. Want to go ahead and stop recording?
Okay.